Everyone remembers the golden age of Atari, back in the early 1980s. The innovation and success of the company translated to endless fun for those of us on the other side of the screen. After 50-plus years, Atari is still alive and kicking, but that was never guaranteed. Atari was once dead, buried, and forgotten, and it took an unusual series of events to bring the original video game company back from obscurity. Stay here for the story of Atari's second lease on life. In 2022, Atari Inc. celebrated its 50th anniversary, and in that half-century, the company has been around the auction block more times than you'd think. Atari has changed ownership, split up, gone bankrupt, merged, and recombined so many times, I honestly can't keep track of it. Yet, the Fuji still survives. The recent offerings of Atari in the 2020s are many and evoke the golden age, specifically the early 80s. New Atari games feature classic gameplay and familiar names, reworked for modern sensibilities, often with ambient sounds and sparse graphics, echoing the experience one found in an arcade, circa 1981. Today, Atari Inc. is owned by some kid who was born after the golden age ended. I don't know much else about him, but the new boss felt the need to insert himself among true legends in Atari 50.
Oh, what is the name of the bar in Palo Alto?
In case you were wondering about the historic ups and downs of Atari, here's the short version. Nolan Bushnell set up Atari Inc. in 1972. The first Atari game, Pong, was a smash hit, and the company grew to be the biggest tech startup in history up to that point. In 1976, Warner Communications stepped in and bought the company for $28 million. Nolan was forced out soon after. When Atari went corporate, they released the Video Computer System, aka 2600, and home video games as we know them were born. This is the true meat of the meat, where for a good 5 or 6 year run, all of the games synonymous with the Fuji were created. In 1984, the company was split asunder, never again to exist as a singular entity. The home games and computer division were sold to Jack Trammell, becoming Atari Corporation. The arcade division continued under Warner as Atari Games and eventually became independent, while Warner held a sizable ownership stake. The two Ataris went their own ways and often collaborated in the late 80s and early 90s. Atari Games was eventually absorbed into Midway. Remember, this is the short version. While Atari Corporation lasted until 1996, when it merged with a hard drive manufacturer nobody has ever heard of, JTS. Operations still continued under JTS, where games were released for the PC, Saturn, and PlayStation, such as Tempest X3. Now that itself is a wild ride, and where the original Atari died out. But there is a second layer to the story that often goes without mention. Toy and board game giant Hasbro began to make serious inroads into gaming in the 1990s. Existing works such as Scrabble and Risk were licensed out and sold well in video game form. Hasbro realized they could cut out the middleman and publish the games on their own, establishing Hasbro Interactive in 1995. That year, the company went so far as to register the web address games.com. Very forward-thinking. The initial offerings of Hasbro Interactive were mostly video game versions of board games for Windows 95 PCs. At the same time, the company expanded, buying and licensing many properties, which led to video game development for the Sony PlayStation in 1997. While all of this was happening, JTS, the owners of the remains of Atari, went bankrupt. The assets of the first ever video game company were sold to Hasbro for only $5 million. It was a drop in the bucket compared to the rest of Hasbro's expansion. Hasbro used the Atari name to its advantage, setting up a new label, Atari Interactive. There was a deep library of classic games to choose from, and some brand recognition. But rather than reissue the same old games, the new Atari would embrace the modern day with fully developed, modern renditions of familiar favorites. Atari was brought back from the dead, and for the first time in almost 15 years, under ownership that cared about making games and was willing to put up serious money to be competitive. By the end of 1998, new games were ready to roll. Atari was back.
How huge is the new Pong? almost back huge.
Oh, nice one. The new Pong. Massive new levels, major 3D graphics, and king-size competition. Outrageous arenas, special power-ups, killer moves, Pong soccer style. Take on water games and penguins. Yes, penguins. Up to 4 players can go at it in a big-time Pong-a-palooza. The new Pong. It's huge. For PC and the PlayStation game console. Only from Atari. Play again.
The first game under the new Atari was Centipede, released in October 1998 for Windows PCs and the Sony PlayStation not long after. The game keeps the original concept of blasting bugs and chasing after the centipede, only this time the stages are in full 3D. With a choice of viewpoints, you can make things look very modern or go with a classic top-down view. Somewhere in the middle has always been my preference. The new Centipede features a more detailed backstory, complete with animated and voiced cutscenes in the opening and ending. Alluding to the events of the original game, the Queen Centipede and her army awakens once every century, wreaking havoc on the world of Weedom. As the 100-year window closes, only one chosen hero, a guy named Wally, can save the day. His weapon? A small hovercraft known as the Shooter. The rules of classic Centipede apply here. Blast the head of the centipede, and the next piece takes its place. The centipede bounces off mushrooms scattered about as it moves across the stage. If you can line things up just right, one rapid-fire succession can wipe out the entire centipede. Along with that, all sorts of other bugs are running around. Spiders nab more points the closer you get when you take them out, with that value displayed on screen. A nice callback to the arcade. Not to mention the mushrooms change colors after each centipede is destroyed. Every stage requires Wally to rescue villagers and protect homes, which earn bonus points. Also, Wally can gain power-ups for the Shooter. 3-way blasts, shields, and other niceties that makes the battle easier. Across nearly 24 stages, Wally does his best to drive the bugs out of Weedom and face the Queen, so that the world can be at peace once again, at least for the next 100 years. As an added bonus, the original arcade version from 1981 is included. Pong: The Next Level arrived in 1999, a complete revamping from top to bottom. Pong TNL adds color and somewhat of a story to the original classic. The Pong paddle travels around the world facing many challengers in a quest to be the best. The paddles have come to life and even get a bit of personality. Each stage pits the red paddle against the blue. Reaching the set number of points first secures a win. Each victory is rewarded with gold bars. These fill up your Atari meter, which opens up further zones along the way. When the Atari meter is full, other modes are unlocked, including the original version from 1972. Stages are played in a stadium, on ice with penguins, in a pinball game, and sometimes ancient catacombs. Each level features obstacles and hazards that raise the challenge. Some things block the ball, speed it up, slow it down, or change the trajectory. The graphics are bright and colorful. It's interesting to see how the environments and presentation for the game are handled, considering the original was only a few white lines on a black background. The graphics do suffer from the jaggies that are common in PlayStation 1 games. After 25 years, with 1080 as the modern-day baseline, maybe that style has become endearing and is ready for a comeback. Pong: The Next Level is quite fun, and you'd be surprised with how many variations of bouncing a ball back and forth can be done in the game. Don't forget the multiplayer modes, where up to 4 people can go head-to-head, including the last Pong standing survival game. Considering that the original Pong is such a simple game, and that the Pong name carries a lot of weight, The Next Level is a well-made game that leans on nostalgia just enough while offering something original and fun that lasts longer than just a few minutes. Certainly, a difficult balancing act. Breakout, released in 2000, is a one-player Pong with an added challenge. Very much like the original concept Steve Wozniak came up with back in 1976. The little red paddle is back, this time with a face and a name: Bouncer. Breakout comes with a fully formed story and quest. Bouncer's girlfriend, Daisy, has been kidnapped by Batniks. The evil paddle takes Bouncer and his friends and locks them all away, allowing Batniks to conquer the world. Bouncer has to make his way to Batniks' lair and rescue Daisy. How's he going to do that? Simple. Break out. After escaping from the dungeon, it's up to you to send Bouncer around the world and rescue his friends. Then, make it all the way to Batnix's hideout on the moon for the final showdown. Pong the Next Level was pretty inventive, and with Breakout, the Next Level tag can also apply here. The gameplay mechanics are easy enough to understand, using bouncing balls and other objects to clear the obstacles that stand in the way. The stages are in 3D, but how else can I explain it? Actual 3D. Many stages require breaking blocks that are several layers deep and also several layers high. There are all kinds of obstacles in the way: lasers, fire, water, and animals. Chickens and sheep are always making trouble, not to mention dragons. In each stage, there are different power-ups that help you through. Bouncer can become bigger, longer, or faster, as well as being able to grab the ball and fling it back. Once you rescue your friends, you'll learn that each one has a special power automatically, offering you some strategy for handling each level. Throughout the game, your performance is also ranked. It's easy to reach Expert, but Champion and Superstar will take a little more work. While breaking blocks might seem repetitive, Breakout switches things up by offering more modern gameplay, with platforming and boss battles. Sure, it's not Crash Bandicoot or Klonoa, but it certainly mimics those styles every now and then. One thing you surely didn't know is that Breakout also supports the PlayStation mouse. While Pong, Breakout, and even Centipede are fairly lighthearted, Missile Command offers a dramatic contrast with a darker sci-fi theme. Aliens are attacking Earth. The Missile Command Defense Squad suits up to defend humanity from the impending invasion. The gameplay is straightforward, with 3 spaceships hovering above the city, intercepting the oncoming onslaught, nearly identical to the stationary turrets in the 1980 arcade original. If you've only played the 2600 version, which fires just from one location, you'll notice the difference. The story ties into this very well, as there are 3 characters who appear in the game, each one manning their respective station. Much like Centipede, the added animations and voiceovers help give Missile Command a modern feel. The gameplay is set to a single plane, where the player can move around the screen, though not very much. The bottom of the screen features a radar to keep you oriented, a counter of how many missiles are left in the arsenal, and the number of cities that have survived, as well as some dialogue from the 3 heroes, often with warnings about running out of ammo or low health. Each missile commander is controlled with either the square, cross, or circle button. Triangle is reserved for special weapons. After each area is completed, the battle goes into space to take down the mother ship. If you win, you save the world, and if you don't, well, I think we know what happens. The original arcade version is not here, but the classic mode does feature a static screen that plays just like the arcade, only with PS1 style graphics. In addition to the heavy hitters that carried the Atari name, there were Atari-ish Games, ones that were never created by Atari, but had such a strong connection to the golden age by virtue of being on the 2600 that these often get lumped together with Pong and all the rest. Frogger was one such game, along with the sequel, Frogger 2: Swampy's Revenge. Frogger was actually the very first PlayStation game by Hasbro Interactive, released in 1997, before the Atari acquisition, and essentially created this format of taking 80s arcade games and dropping them into 3D environments. Qbert, which was quite good, combined the mental challenge of coloring the board, mixed with new level designs that are very satisfying to complete. Galaga Destination Earth, the classic arcade game transformed into a 3D on-rails shooter. Then there was Glover, a wholly original creation. The game feels like the next step in an evolution that was started with Pong the Next Level, continued with Breakout, and expands here into a full-on Mario 64 style game. The next Tetris was one other game released under the Atari label in 1999. I find it very fitting and, dare I say, poetic, as Tetris was brought to the free side of the Iron Curtain, in part, by Atari Games. They didn't actually have the right to do so and were kind of cheated by Nintendo in the end. So it's great to see the new Atari get the win this one time. There were even more games that helped Hasbro and Atari along that were considered Atari-ish. Asteroids. Wait, isn't that an Atari game? Yeah, it is, but Activision released this one. Activision also gave us Space Invaders and another Atari 2600 classic, Pitfall, in an updated form. Then there are all the other games that fit into this category of classic video games that were remade to match the graphics and gameplay of modern games. In 1995, these did not exist, but by 2001, the genre was robust and could stand on its own, bringing in the old-timers like myself, who still had their old Ataris plugged in. And for the kids, a chance to show that old and forgotten games can be very fun and aren't embarrassing when caught enjoying.
Let's all hop, 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 like Hubert. Leap and jump and rock, like Hubert. Change those colors, like Hubert. Hop until we drop, like Hubert.
It's Hubert, the hip-hopping hero with a nose for adventure. Leap over 50 fantastic cube worlds and rescue the fair Cudina from the clutches of Coily the Snake. Hop solo or team up with a friend.
Let's all hop, 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 like Hubert. Hop, 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 like Hubert.
Hubert for PC and the PlayStation game console. Windows 95 or higher, only from Atari.
As the calendar turned to the year 2000, the new Atari had made itself known with games that were classics, not simple ports or compilations. There were multiple releases of games that were 32-bit caliber, backed with heavy promotion. Most of the effort was focused on the Sony PlayStation, but several games were brought to Windows, Mac, and the Sega Dreamcast, often with improved graphics. Some games like Pong: The Next Level also made it to the Game Boy Color. Atari was no longer tied down to hardware nobody wanted to buy. Third party was the best place to be, focusing cash reserves on software and advertising. The games weren't Final Fantasy VII, but they were enjoyable and gave entertainment to many. Far more people owned Breakout and Centipede on the PlayStation 1 than ever owned a Jaguar, not even close. And in the end, getting the games out there and being played is what matters. It was a fun and exciting time to see the Atari name and Fuji logo back on TV, in game magazines, and on store shelves. However, things wouldn't last. At the end of 2000, Hasbro put Atari on the auction block. While 1997 and 98 were record years sales-wise, the company lost millions in 1999 and 2000. The expansion efforts were very expensive and happened too rapidly. Many games received mixed reviews. These ranged from as high as a 9 out of 10 from IGN.com for Pong to 2s and 3s by EGM Magazine for Centipede. It didn't send a clear, confident message to consumers. In January 2001, the parent company, Hasbro, sold Hasbro Interactive, which included Atari, for $100 million to Infogrames, a French PC games publisher, a value 20 times the amount it was worth in 1998. Infogrames would continue to release classic Atari games, both in original and updated versions. The lineage of Atari is a bit difficult to track after 2001, as Infogrames would assume the Atari name company-wide, only to go bankrupt, be sold off, and bought up again several times over the course of 20 years. Infogrames still has a hand in the company today, but the full timeline is so confusing, nobody can understand it. Still, the Atari name exists today thanks to Hasbro, who brought it out of the dark. Without that initial effort, who knows what would have happened to the original video game company. That alone is commendable enough, and a vital link in the chain of events that made up Atari's first 50 years.